Right. Nice to see everyone in the room, both rooms. So my name is Reverend Liên Shutt. My pronouns are she and they. And I'm just talking, Stephen and I was trying to remember where exactly I met Dhammadipa, then known as Koning, either at San Francisco Zen Center, City Center, or Tassajara, probably City Center when she was still a lay person, and myself also. So a while ago, and we've been good friends ever since. So I was very disappointed when I was off to London when I was going to be here, and very happy for her. I know she's thrilled and glad to be here. And thank you, Stephen, for letting me be here tonight. All right, let's just say hi to each other. Let's see, is there a way do I unmute everyone, or everyone can unmute with each other and then just say hi? I like to say on the Zoom, try to say people's name and look into each other's eyes, and that way you can have some more connection, and then we can do that in the room. All right, okay, go for it. Okay, we are going to start out with a meditation for 30 minutes. Use one from the book. So in the Zen tradition I'm in, I'll ring the bell 3 times to start and 1 to end. Here we go. All right, there's a 30-minute meditation. It's going to be in Upekkha or Peksha, one of the 4 Brahma Viharas. So I'll just be quiet for a few minutes while you settle. Anyone new completely to meditation you should be aware of. Okay, and I'll really be quiet while you settle in for a few minutes. This practice is from this chapter on skillful mindfulness. It's called Equanimity, Resilience, Meditation for One and All. Remember that upekkha is one of the four Brahma viharas. It is usually translated as equanimity. Very specifically, upekkha here means the equanimity that comes through a deep understanding of karma, or cause and effect, or action and result. As such, I have been trying out upekkha as resilience. See how this works for you. As you settle into your posture, remember during the Brahma Viharas, you can shift if you need to, not only in body, but tweak a little bit the phrase. Doesn't quite work for you. Visualization. Perhaps take some deep breaths here, as many as you need. Again, feel free to shift. I like to say with the Brahma Viharas that was strengthening our sense that the phrases I'm going to offer, the qualities in them are true and possible. Not so much whether you get it right or wrong. Really to strengthen your resilience or upekkha muscle, so to speak. So rational truth is also important. So now you're going to visualize yourself in any way you can receive the following phrases. I say them out loud, you say them to yourself silently. I am the nature of flexibility as I meet the comings and goings of my life. Joys and sorrows are a natural part of my life, and I am open and able to receive. Remember, you can tweak it, so if that sounds too big, you could perhaps add this next inhale, with this, in this moment, whatever it is, to let it be possible and true for yourself. Let me access clarity of heart and mind to meet the conditions of my life as they are. May I know that resilience is of my nature all the days of my life. And the next inhale, connect with how you know that these phrases or the quality in them are true and possible for you. One or all of them, just the sense of them. It doesn't even have to be the exact wording I use, just some sense of resilience, clarity of heart and mind, being with your life as it is, the sorrows and the joys. Practicing to let the phrases in, to let yourself know them, to let them permeate, so that there's some sense of knowing that feels true and possible for you right here and right now. In the next few breaths, also feel the result of letting in these phrases into your body. If it's useful, you can visualize it, or have a sense of it as a breeze or a ray of light permeating through the pores, perhaps coming up through the bottom of your feet if you're seated in a chair, or coursing through your body from head to toes. Perhaps there's a sense of stability in your trunk of your seat, be it in the hips if you're seated, or the heaviness of the back if you're lying down, your feet if you're on a chair or walking or standing. Let yourself know it and rest in the knowing, the possibility, clarity of heart, stability, and settledness, the comings and goings of events of life. Now we're going to do it for all beings. Or it can be all beings in a specific area, perhaps in the Middle East right now, or some group of people or neighborhood you just went through, or as all beings as a sense of perhaps that breeze going across all beings, and the light rays coming down on all beings, wherever it lands. Offer them these phrases in a way that works for you. May all beings access flexibility within the comings and goings of their lives. May every one of us be able to harmonize our joys and sorrows as they come and go. Let clarity of heart and mind be our guide in every situation in service of non-harming. May the realization that our strength rests in resilience be possible for every one of us all the days of our lives, and whenever we need it. On the next inhale, let yourself connect to how you know these qualities are true and possible. First for yourself with the inhale, and then on the next exhale, feel these truths and then extend them outside, far and wide, to your directed all beings, and to all beings in all directions. As the rays of sunlight, the breeze touches. And as some of us at least are doing all beings, as in no one, without an exception, everyone. Feel that request or that offering coming back to you, that resonance, and yours going out and it's coming back and forth, supporting us all whenever we need it. So again, the qualities I'm offering is flexibility, harmonizing with the challenges and joys of our lives, clarity of heart and mind, in service of non-harming, knowing that our strength rests in resilience. It's a bit more of the meditation, which I'll be silent. You can offer it to a being, a group of beings, for yourself, all beings, however it works for you. Offer it, and also don't forget to receive it as others offering it to you. And to just really feel that back and forth between us all. As much as possible, let that be known to you as true and possible. May all beings access flexibility within the comings and goings of their lives. In every one of us, we have to find some harmony, a sense of settledness in the midst of challenges and sorrows as they come and go in our human life. The clarity of heart and mind be our guide in every situation, in service of non-harm. May the realization that our strength rests in resilience be possible for every one of us, all the days of our lives. On the inhale, let yourself connect to how you know these qualities to be true and possible. And on the next exhale, feeling these truths inside and extend them out. And as we're offering it to all beings, let yourself feel them coming back to you, creating resonance that's back and forth between us all. Offering and receiving support, without exception, to all beings. Again, feel it in your body, in your heart, in your mind. Rest in the connection. These qualities are true and possible for each and every one of us, within us and between us. Let's take a break. I'm sorry? Okay, all right. How's that for everyone? Good? All right. Well, I will say that I've been doing a few of these for the book and try to have them a little bit different than each of them. And I did ask Yuan, who I'm staying with, thank you for putting me up and putting up with me, maybe. Yeah, you know what might be of interest to you. And Yuan said, well, what about the situation with Hamas and Israel? And how does this book answer any of that? And so the book is about how to heal from oppression, racism in particular, or more specifically and more broadly. It is a reframing of the Four Noble Truths into what I call the Engaged Four Noble Truths. That's been funded by the Hamera Foundation since 2017. After I was at a Gen X teacher conference, in which around that time there was another round of sexual misconduct coming to the light, so to speak, in some of North American sanghas. So the right use of power was brought in as a model. Do people know the right use of power? Oh, it's by Cedar Barstow, who's a social worker. So I really appreciate that. And it's the sense is that there's a whole book and there's whole trainings. But in a nutshell, it's about how in every situation there's a power differential. So the main thing is that there's what's called a down power and an up power. And so we need to be aware of that in a situation, and it can change in any moment. For instance, as a person of color, I'm in the down power position in the system of oppression of racism. But as someone who has a master's degree in social work, I'm in the up power and access to labor. These are general. And therefore, most of us in any situation can shift in power. And so how it helps us to have a sense of what might be appropriate response. For instance, one could reply in a way and in retrospect think, oh, that's from a down power. And yet, if I perhaps should have responded from an up power position, might have been better. For instance, right now, just say something racist happens towards Asians, and I am therefore, classically would be in the down power position. However, I'm in the teacher seat, so I have some power, and in fact, probably I have the power in the room, and so I should actually take care of the situation in the room, the more organizational. So it helps us to, I find it very useful both in terms of responsibility, and then also in terms of how I might have responded in one way and then go, it would have been useful to remember where I'm in this power differential. And so that's useful. So in terms of the Four Noble Truths, in terms of the engaged version, we start out as a restoration point that not just that there's dukkha in life, but that in fact there's hurt and harm. Because restoration really happens once there's that admission that something is wrong or broken or has been devalued. And in fact, that's how restoration begins, when that's agreed upon. And a lot of mediation is about trying to figure out how we can agree on what the problem is. And restoration is also needed when we say, from here, how will we do things differently? Not just something's wrong, I'm sorry, but it has to be a commitment. And so the second noble truth then is, what are the causes and conditions of hurt and harm, which sounds a lot like the original one, except we focus more on structural conditioning and not just individual conditioning. And then the third noble truth is, how can we connect to agency in the midst of hurt and harm, both individual and collective agency? And then the last is that the Eightfold Path, in fact, empowers us to be skillful in finding agency for ourselves and with others. So when Yuen asked that question, I said, oh, gosh, pretty big there. And also, nope, nothing in here very specifically talks about that. And then I thought very much about, and I had wanted to talk about skillful concentration in particular as providing stability. And then I thought, what really comes up for me is a sense of appropriate response. And in fact, from there, though, it's not knowing. So in skillful mindfulness, I have this to say. Each of these chapters begin with a story, a personal story that helps illuminate for me that Eightfold Path factor. But I'm not going to read it because it seems pretty small compared to the question. However, in skillful mindfulness, I talk very much about how we start out that there's an issue, and then we do have ways of working with the issues. And by the time we get to skillful mindfulness, we actually also have to say that we don't know. Because it isn't just about knowing what needs to be done, because we have to be open to possibilities of different ways of approaching, especially when the conflict is confusing or complex or layered. We have to be able to be with uncertainty, with not knowing. Dogen, the Japanese founder of Soto Zen, often taught that practice and realization are not separate. In the doing is how we know and how we realize. So we just have a word, practice realization. Our practice is a liberating practice, which is to say we have to learn to go beyond individual and structure. That's another way that you can think about when we respond from an individual sense, usually is of down power, right? When we can have that resonance of another person's injustice against another. Often there's a personal, individual kind of connection. And then there's what we say is the larger or structural. Right? And yet we can't just stay with that dichotomy. How can we also connect to the openness that's beyond duality and dichotomy? Maybe you're saying to me, tell me where that is. I want to get there right now. And my answer is, it isn't a place. It's right here and right now. In Zen, we say we don't wake up to another life. We wake up to this life. We wake up to realizing how we've been perceiving or viewing things. We wake up to knowing there are other ways to be in life if we're willing to open up our view to how we perceive and conceptualize. One way is to see beyond duality, is to see that it isn't just personal or just structural. They are always in relation to each other. We need to pay more attention to how they interact with each other. This is a way to go beyond duality. We are taught in many ways, and certainly by white supremacy culture and other forms of oppressions, that the main place to enact our agency and power is as individuals. It isn't emphasized that we also have collective power. Furthermore, the key isn't asserting one or the other as better or as shoulds. A way to work with overcoming dualistic framing is to practice putting our attention and practice on how to negotiate between our relative and absolute experiences. Relative can be understood as a personal, individualistic experience. When we hear absolute, we might understand it as objective. However, in Buddhism, until we are a Buddha, one who fully and consistently, that's the hardest part, I think, perceives and acts from wholeness, we are never objective, as we only see from our conditioned sense of the world. This is the engaged second noble truth. The causes and conditions that give each of us a particular point of view and corresponding behavior in the world. It's not that we don't know absolute. It's that once we put it into words, it becomes conditioned by language at the minimum, and thus no longer absolute. whenever we name absolute, it is through this body, this heart, this mind, and thus relative. I think in a complex situation like what's happening in the Middle East, and I lived in Egypt during the time in which the negotiating with Sadat and just before he was assassinated. So this has been an ongoing thing way before that too. And also, the thing I keep thinking about the Middle East situation is, and it's because we just had Indigenous Peoples Day, right? Is that, yes, lots of oppression, and yet a whole group of people was moved onto another people's land. And so how can we not think that it's going to cause conflict that's ongoing, right? And so it's really layered and complex. And so we want to go, they're wrong, they're right, they're this, they're that. And where does that get us except more conflict? So to me, part of it is being able to actually admit that we have limited view. And that's actually part, I think, of skillful mindfulness. Essentially, we can have a sense of broader experience. As conditioned humans, we are only able to describe and share it in relative ways. From deep practice, I realize I suffer most when I'm clinging to my individualistic idea or relative sense of what the absolute or structure should be. Individualistic and structure are not diametrically opposed. They intertwine, they inter-are. Understanding this can be healing. For instance, when I understood racism as a structure of white supremacy, that's when my healing from racism began. I began understanding that what I felt personal, it also wasn't personal, because it's systemic as well. Mind you, it doesn't mean that it doesn't still hurt. But from this broader, more inclusive understanding, the hurt of the experience shifts to an understanding of its harmful impact. Paradoxically, this then gives me the space to attend to the hurt more as a way to let go of lasting harm. It was a liberatory moment to realize I have a choice as to how much I'm willing to let a racist experience hurt me in this moment and from now on. So in skillful mindfulness, I developed what I call the three corrective movements of liberatory awareness. And it started because there are courses that came from this development in early 2020, when yet another rise of anti-Asian violence and hatred rose. A lot of Asian American students reached out for support, and as I was developing these, I offer a course called Lotus Rising from the Mud. How do we work with the result of the impact of that? And then with George Floyd's murder, then we did one in which we, with other teachers, in which from all our racialized location, because white supremacy culture impacts us all. And so from that, we, in the Lotus group, we are reading Kathy Park Hong. People read Minor Feelings. If you haven't heard of it, I suggest it. She's actually a writer, and so she does some literature kind of critique of stuff, but it is very much about how the dialogue in North America in terms of race is very much a black and white issue. And so where do Asian Americans fit into this? And one of the things she talks about is that she quotes Linda Martine Alcoff, who's a feminist philosopher and theorist on race stuff, who wrote, just blanked on her book, but about the position of white in both North and South America, because she's from South America. She's mixed race. And she talks about how, Linda Martine Alcoff, how W.E.B. Du Bois talks about Black people having to have a double consciousness, right? Because they have to have a sense of the Black self and the larger white culture. And that how with the racial reckoning of things, white people had started to have a sense of white double consciousness, that you also had to see Black view, right, or another view. And I thought that was very interesting, but yet again, nothing about another view. And so as I was investigating, I thought, what might be for Asian Americans? And then I came with these, and I think they can be used for all views. And so one begins with what I call our assimilated views. Those are the views that we were taught, that we've assimilated as truths. Right? Take Indigenous Peoples Day, right? How many years we were like Columbus Day? And we all, I mean, most of us for many years now have been like, not quite it. And yet Columbus Day was still how we were talking about it and having a sense of it. And it wasn't enough movement for it to shift. And then, I was just in Brooklyn and over the holiday, and we were all saying to each other on the calendar, on my Google Calendar, actually says both, right? Columbus Day and Indigenous Peoples Day. But other people were saying in New York, or in Brooklyn at least, they had just kept hearing Indigenous Peoples Day. Like nobody said Columbus Day anymore. And so there's this shift of us realizing our assimilated truth, right? This truth that we had held as a certain way of viewing how this country was developed, right? How this continent. And so this is an example of like awakening to how we have assimilated truths. Now, I know that when we wake up to realizing our assimilated truth, there can be the next one, which is called reactive truth, which is we react to that. I know in terms of Indigenous Peoples Day, so at A to Z, we do meet on Monday nights, which is often where many holidays happen, right? And so we do not meet on Columbus Days, right? Because it's not a holiday that we support. And yet when it became Indigenous Peoples Day, started last year, we now take it as a holiday. And so in a way it's reactive, and reactive doesn't make it bad, mind you, but it's a reaction to something. And I think, a sense of this, right? See if it works for you, is that it's part of the movement, and yet we're still, what makes it reactive is that it's still in relation to that other power that we give power to, a structure that we give power to. It isn't necessarily completely or mostly self-powered or collective self, like as a community. And so then that takes us to what I call clarifying truth, or as it is, which is a Zen thing, but I realize is a very specific, Shunryu Suzuki Roshi, he always says, things are as it is, with hyphens in there. And I'll hold that as a way of framing it. Or a liberatory truth, a truth in which we feel that there's a sense of empowerment, not only individual empowerment, but a collective empowerment. And it isn't, now the thing is, it isn't necessarily make one worse than the other. It's just knowing where you are in your awareness of things. And I think we can also move in a topic or in a way that we see things. And it's in a way waking up to where is our location, or where is it that we have an awareness about. And it's just a model to kind of go, oh, okay, now am I acting in this way that is reactive? And is that how I want? I think sometimes, like if there was marching that was going to happen in response to what happened in the Middle East, then maybe, Is that reactive truth? I would be, yeah, I'm mad as hell. I'm going to go out there and march, Maybe I would have gone, sorry, Stephen, I'm going to go marching in the street instead. We could say that's reactive, but I'm okay with that because it's also something that I'm want to put power behind. And as a community, I support. So again, just because I have these name to them, I think we sometimes think, oh, reactive, that's something I'm trying to get away from. And I think there's some sense that I don't want to live always, being knee-jerked and giving power to things. However, just because it's something you've done was reactive doesn't necessarily make it reactive now, right? So it's not so much about the thing, it's about your motivation for doing it. And remember, motivation is like the key thing in Buddhism, right? What is the motivation behind what we do, not so much the thing itself, right? So the context of things, the motivation, the skillful thinking, that is the drive behind your actions. So, I will leave it at that by ending here with, and then I'd like to open it up for discussion. In each moment, are you open and willing to see a truth for what it is? Can you include that not knowing is also present? We need to have some sense that newness and possibility is liberation. Are you willing to be responsible for the truth you see? Does it bring hurt and harm, or does it bring more connection, more love, more joy for you and those in your life? Ultimately, this is what it comes down to. Can we not have a static or fixed sense of things, but one within context? Openness and awareness of context is one way to define skillful mindfulness. In the context of racism or oppressive systems, it's largely about incorporating inclusive history and activating intentional presence that will engender a non-harming future. I'm at Russian River, sitting on the back deck, gazing out at the river on a bright morning. That's where I wrote. I went for 6 weeks and stayed for 11 months. Thank goodness for Sangha members. I can see a long, long strand of spider web blowing in the breeze. I see a tiny little spider on one end, gently undulating amidst a clear blue sky. Where is the beginning of the strand? I can't see where it's attached, but that spider knows. In the spring, baby spiders hatch. A new spiderling has to be willing to jump off and trust the conditions, such as wind, to take it somewhere else where it will land and start its own web. It carries with it some inherited sense of tradition, but it has to be willing to jump into the unknown and go off on its own to start its own web, its own liberated life. This back deck has a fence with a row of spider webs on it. As an animal rights person, I don't clear away cobwebs or webs much. So now there's a whole community there. We have to have this sense of openness to know what is present, what we've inherited, and what is important to us. We also have to have awareness that there is always going to be not knowing. Therefore, we have to have the resilience to meet conditions in which things don't go as planned, and that things can fall apart, and yet we have the capacity to find centeredness, to not be overwhelmed, and to trust our experience of wholeness as ourselves, as others, and as life conditions right here and right now, as it is. So the meditation we did at the beginnings from this chapter, in fact, and in the Brahma Viharas, as I said in there, but I want to really reiterate, is upekkha is very specifically the stability or the centeredness that comes from realizing karma as a real force in life. And also, in the four Brahma Viharas, upekkha is often, why there are four of them, upekkha is often thought of as either the foundation or the roof, the foundation that supports the other three, metta, karuna, and mudita, or as the roof that protects them. So it's a very, it's the stabilizing force so that the other three factors don't go too wary, to either too high or too low, or too left or too right, and those dualities, right? But so it stabilizes us and it centers, and it gives us in the stability, we don't fall deeply into despair or into the highs of the absolute, how things should be, and fall into despair. So, yeah. Thank you. Thank you for listening.